Good evening. I'm so happy you're here tonight. I'm Mary West Small, and I'm the proud president of the Bronxville Women's Club. And thank you. This glorious place has a wonderful history, and before anything starts, we want you to know a few things, just a few things, so you can take it away and say, I know all about the Women's Club. But this building was finished in 1928, and it was founded, the club, actually built for, and maintained, managed for 99 years by women. So it's Women's Month, and we're very happy that you're with us tonight. And we have male members. That's another small thing you may not know. They're called associate members. They cannot vote, unfortunately, but a few object to that. And but that's something for you to know. And they're all male, female families. We welcome everyone to join. You don't need to be in the Bronxville area, and you had not needed to be in the Bronxville area for years. And then now that we're talking about it, we have one wonderful thing, and I will show it to you at the after the event. We'll put it out for you. But the Women's Club published for 75 years its own magazine with a multitude of advertisers that sustained itself with some of the finest works by women and men, poetry as well as fiction, nonfiction. So we'll share some of those books with you at the social at the end of the evening. And then lastly, I want you to know that we're 414 days away from that 99th anniversary. So please, right, 100 years, 13 months away. But we're celebrating the 99th because nobody thought we'd make it this far. So please, if you have, we'll talk about this a little bit later, and it'll be on display. But if you can, please come and celebrate with us on April 24th. It means a lot to all of us. So thank you for being part of history, because tonight is part of a series of women empowerment within the Women's Club, and it's Women's Month, and we're so proud to be amongst the best community ever. So thank you for being here tonight.
I think the best things that happen in life happen by accident. Who could plan this? Who could have guessed this? I was born and raised on Long Island. I moved to the city reluctantly because I met this great guy. He was from California. And then we decided we'd come to Bronxville. I wasn't too keen about this, but okay. So I'm walking around because I don't drive. I keep passing this building. It's really gorgeous, and I discover it's the Women's Club. So they said, would you like to join? And I thought, oh, okay, I could do that. And then I thought, well, what could I do? I was a businesswoman. I have dyslexia. I have a hard time reading. I was great at reading business stuff. So one day, I think somebody said, we have an author who, I think it was the pandemic. And I want you to know networking is net worth. Got to do that. So Marcy Weidler introduced me to Lauren Marino, and she was really the first book talk that we had. We did it on Zoom. So here I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got to read. And that started a whole series of bringing women authors to the club. And what I discovered was the power of women, not only just coming together, but telling their stories. And I wanted to then take it a step further and say, how can I engage you, get you to do something, not just read a book or hear someone talk about it. I wanted to move you. And what I realized by accident that my former life as an entrepreneur, as a corporate exec, was not in my soul. What was in my soul was my grandmother and my mother, who were teachers. And that is how this all came about. So we've had Lauren, we've had Mary Calvi, we had Fran Hauser, we've had Iman Ubu, but then, by accident, the phone rings. And who is it? Christie Derrico. She has somebody who has a book, and she'd like to have a salon. And I thought, wow, what if we make this bigger? And that's how tonight happened. So I'm totally grateful that the Women's Club has given me a platform to explore my other side, the side of my mother, of my grandmother, of my aunts, of women, powerful women, smart women, teachers. And they have given me an opportunity to work with women, which I want to do. I want to help women take the next step, to learn soft skills, to learn tactics, to learn strategies, and above all, be fearless in raising their voices. And there is nothing more powerful than the written word. So I am grateful that you reached out. And on that note, I'd like to introduce Maura, Carlin, and Christie Derrico of the Balanced Dilemma podcast.
Thank you, Ellen. So I'm Maura Carlin,
And I'm Christie Derrico. Good evening.
and we host the Balanced Dilemma podcast. And on the Balanced Dilemma, we tackle the often uniquely, but not always, female dilemma of managing life, work, family, and self.
We speak with women and men to hear their balanced stories. Our guests are entrepreneurs, reinventors, creators, executives, parents and partners, and also authors.
Telling us what we want to know. How the heck did you manage that? So we like to think of the show as a cross between This American Woman's Life and How I Built This. We share stories, some successes, some redos, some pivots, in our quest for a life we find joy in, while keeping ourselves relatively sane as we juggle careers, families, spouses, passions, other relationships. And in the process, we also explore societal constraints and needed changes in order to pursue these aims. And we'd like to say Mary Westmoreland was episode 65. A military mom rises and leads, so I suggest you listen to that. And one of our panelists today, Loren Stephens, was episode 52, Pivot, 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 and Never Give Up.
So we have one small request. Our board is back on that table over there that has QR codes where you can connect with us, and we'd like you to follow us, rate us. We're on all platforms for podcasts, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, but that's really how we get the word out. And yes, so no, we get the word out and we support other women, and also to support the authors that we have here today. So shall I begin with our first guest?
Yes, please start introducing the panelists. That'd be great.
Okay, so I was in my office one day, and my landlord had a book sitting there, and it looked like a really interesting work of fiction. I said, Marty, I don't think you're going to read this. I'm just going to take this from you. And it ended up being a book by Loren Stephens, All Sorrows Can Be Born. Loren is a widely published essayist. Also, I'll note we have two Lorens this evening. So we have L.O. Loren and L.A.U. Loren, and we have to be careful to distinguish. Both are equally as important, but do different things. Loren Stephens, Loren, you want to raise your hand, Loren Stephens? There we go. She's widely published essayist, short story writer, and novelist. Her work has appeared in the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Montreal Literary Review, just to name a few. She's president and founder of Right Wisdom and Bright Star Memoirs, which are ghostwriters based in Los Angeles. So she's flown all the way out here, and this is in part for this wonderful event. Out in February 2024 will be We're Live in 5, My Extraordinary Life in TV and Live Television by Jeff Margolis, which Loren co-authored, and Adieu, a memoir of Holocaust survival by Alfred J. Lakritz. Lauren's debut novel, All Sorrows Can Be Borne, was based upon her husband's Japanese family. It was published by Rare Bird in 2021. And hearing all the authors' path to publication is something we always delve into, because anyone who is an author or is an aspiring author needs to hear these stories. It isn't easy. So Lauren's a great cheerleader and is a resource to help you with that, along with the other panelists. Before going into these endeavors, she was a documentary filmmaker and the recipient of a National Emmy nomination for PBS Legacy of the Hollywood Blacklist, and winner of 2 Cine Gold Eagles, I hope that I've pronounced that correctly, her docudrama Sojourner Truth, Ain't I a Woman, starring Julie Harris and Roscoe Lee Brown, which was produced by Cornet Films.
Welcome, Lauren. Okay, so I have the honor of introducing the other 2 panelists. So let's see. I'm going to save Lauren for last. Bethany Saltman writes and tells us that she still can't believe she gets to write and work with books for a living. Her critically acclaimed book, Strange Situation, A Mother's Journey into the Science of Attachment, was named one of the top science books of 2020 by New Scientist and has been published in 5 countries and is included in the psychology syllabi around the world. I will tell you that I started reading it and it absolutely cracked me open. And I really encourage you to read this. It gives you some insight into why you are the way you are and how you love, how you work, how you think, how you be. So I want to just put in a plug. Okay, and then onward here, Bethany now is a best-selling book coach working with women, and she's the co-host of the Bookbound podcast. You got to listen to this. If you seriously want to think about writing, you have to listen to every one of these episodes. They're phenomenal. They'll teach you about marketing. They'll teach you about perseverance. One woman was rejected 50 times before she got a book deal. So you want to hear this. This is the inside, the guts of what it takes to become a published author. Bethany is obsessed with the art of the nonfiction book proposal and with helping women claim their authority. She is also a Brown University certified leadership coach, and she lives in the Catskills in New York with her husband, teenage daughter, and their 2 standard poodles. So I want you to make sure that you connect with Bethany on all of those different ways. Lauren Marino, you changed my life. I read your goddamn book. And I got curious. These were great stories. Lauren wrote Bookish Broads. I think you wrote it because you were angry. She's in the publishing industry, she gets the trades, and she sees the top 100 books of all time read by most people. Only 13 are by women. How could that be, says Lauren. And she sets out on a journey to find women who not only wrote themselves into history, changed the literary canon with the development of the novel, but these backstories of what these women had to go through, what they did to write, to get published. I thought, oh my God, there's not enough days in my life to read everybody. And knowing the backstory, like of Mary Shelley, she had miscarriages, and so she writes this book, Frankenstein. What is Frankenstein really about? Life, death, creation? Is that something that is so wonderfully feminine? The woman's experience? No man could write that. In any event, sorry. I love your book. All right, so Lauren is a writer, editor, and publishing executive with extensive experience working with major publishers, literary agents, and authors. She is currently editorial director at Hachette, which is one of the 5 big publishing houses, where she acquires, edits nonfiction across categories. Prior to that, she was the vice president and editorial director of Gotham, where she was the founding editor in 2001. She was responsible again for acquiring, editing, and publishing multiple bestsellers in a variety of nonfiction categories. As I mentioned, she is the author of Bookish Broads, Women Who Wrote Themselves into History. I believe everyone should have this in their house. Whether you're a man, a woman, you have kids, you don't want to read a classic without reading Lauren's book. So that was published in 2021 by Abrams. Another book, which I'm really curious about, I don't know why I haven't bought it yet. What Would Dolly Do? How to Be a Diamond in a Rhinestone World. Does that sound like you need to know this right away? And then she did Jackie and Cassini, A Fashion Love Affair, published in 2016 by Running Press. And there you have our 3 panelists for the evening. Thank you, women, for coming. Okay, so I'm going to kick this off, and Maura and I are going to ping-pong back and forth questions. And the way we've set this up is we've got 5 questions that'll be open to everybody on the panel, free form. We want to leave time to have people who have questions to have an opportunity. So we are hoping that you can kind of corral your answers, although all of you have fabulous stories. So how can we ask you to do that? All right, so the first one is this a book? What's great about our panel tonight is that Loren has written several fiction books. Loren and Bethany have 2 different types of nonfiction books that they've published. So from each of their vantage points, how did you begin? How did you go from the idea to publish and then to selling the book? What did you learn along the way? And how would you advise the audience today, starting with, how do you know you have a book? So have at it.
You first. I'll go first, because I have a different background, and in a way it made my life easier, made getting published a lot easier, because, I mean, first of all, I've been writing since I could read. So I have notebooks and notebooks and notebooks. I've always been a huge reader, big bookworm, so I moved to New York without knowing a soul in the world and said I'm going to go become a book editor, and somehow I did that. So I have been doing this really my entire life, so for me I've been coming up with book ideas forever. What happened to me is I've been in publishing for 20 some odd years, and I got divorced and lost my job in the same year. And I had 2 little kids at home, and I really didn't know where my next, dollar was coming from. I wasn't getting child support. It was just brutal all around. And I just didn't want to go back into publishing, and it's also very hard to find jobs. And I remember going to, I don't want to get too long-winded, but I basically was told by the outplacement office, I think I was 40, well, you better, she said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to write books, because I've always wanted to do that. I've been working and working my entire life, and now I'm a mother, and I just feel like if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. She said, well, 2 years from now, you're going to be unemployable, so you better go to work right now. So, so supposedly, at age 50, a woman is no longer considered employable. So I said, well, I'm going to show you. That led to me doing a lot of ghostwriting. For 5 years, I wrote a lot of books for other people. I did a lot of book proposals. I found I made more money, which I needed, and I'm upfront about that. I had to support my kids. But it was also just a lot more fun for me to write books on my own. And what I did is I wrote books about women that inspired me. And I mean, writing about Dolly Parton kind of saved my life, because she's not who you think she is. She grew up in a shack with no running water, 14 kids. Her father couldn't read or write, and then she became who she is now. She's a huge, not only is she an incredible songwriter and performer, but she's also one of the world's biggest literacy advocates, and she taught her own father how to read. So for me, literacy and the power of the written word is everything. So with Dolly, in a roundabout way, it was about that, but also writing that book allowed me to write, and I was very nervous about it. But I found an agent because I know agents, so I knew exactly which one to call, and he's a big Dolly Parton fan, so that was, it was kind of a no-brainer. That one worked out. Bookish Broads was when I read this article, and I wasn't even necessarily looking for my next book idea, but it's really about the algorithms in tech and how, if you Google, and I haven't done it recently, but if you Google best books in the world's best books, top selling, the top 100, 14 are by women. But we know in the book publishing industry that 80% of books are bought by women. So it's the algorithm, it's prejudice, and I said, I'm gonna go dig in and find out what's been going on here. So I went way deep. I consider this was me getting my fake PhD in women's literature and women's history. I got to go back and research all of these writers I had been reading since I was a young child, including like Frances Hodgson Burnett and Louisa May Alcott, but also more contemporary authors. And I learned about the tremendous obstacles that they had to overcome in order to be writers. Being a mother and being a writer, not, very, very difficult to do. Most female writers do not have children. You either have to have a lot of money or a super supportive husband or and no children. Anyway, I don't want to go on and on, but that's, I had a different path because I was able to find an agent, but I also knew how the industry worked, so I knew exactly what I had to do to be focused to do it, and I also had survival as a motivator, which really was, helpful.
Lauren, what about?
Wow. I am a person who never takes no for an answer. I had kind of had several different careers, most recently in the mortgage banking business, and then went into documentary filmmaking. But my real passion was writing. And I think one of the keys to anyone's trajectory is, what was your dream when you were in 7th grade? What did you really want to do before the naysayers came along and said, you can't do this? And in my case, it was my father who said, you can't get an MA at Columbia. What are you going to do? I mean, there's no way that you're going to support yourself. Why don't you do whatever? And so I went to Columbia and got my MA in International Affairs, and that set me on a very interesting, actually fascinating trajectory. But it was like I put on a coat that didn't really fit me. And in my 50s, I decided I was going to write my mother's memoir. She was a very interesting woman. She had been an opera singer. She was an art collector. She'd grown up in Manhattan at a very interesting time, kind of post-World War I. And I said, Mom, I really want to sit down with you and write your book. And of course she said, absolutely not. Who in heaven's name would want to read my book? And I said, well, I certainly would, which, by the way, as a sidebar, you always want to write the book that you wish someone else had written. You go to a bookstore and you're looking for that book that's going to help you in your personal journey, whether it be helping as a caregiver or whatever. You know what? You do it yourself. You do it yourself. So I was very patient, and someone came to her and said, Carol, you have had the most interesting life. And she said, why don't you write your life story? And that was it. I mean, it's always the messenger who kind of, who's the one who sells the idea. I was a nobody in her eyes in terms of authority. But this other person was somebody that she really respected. So a year and a half later, her book came out. She was absolutely thrilled, and it went on her coffee table, and anyone who came into the home was given a copy. And then I thought, gee, this could really be a business. I've seen so much pleasure out of doing this. why don't I see if I can try and do this for other people? And so Right Wisdom and Bright Star Memoirs got born, and I had a huge network, as we can all attest. So much of your success is based on who you know and who's going to champion you. And my first clients, author clients I call them, were people that I had worked with in a nonprofit, raising large dollars with them. They trusted me. We had a lot in common, and that was sort of the spigot opened. And before I knew it, I had more people asking me to help them write their books than I had time for. I eventually organized a group of journalists who worked with me, and we've written 40 books at this point in all different genres and all different areas. And I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more about my own writing.
Gosh, I'm trying to think of where to come in. There's a lot. I'm very riveted by all of both of your stories. So the question was, well, how do we know if a book is a book? That was one of the questions. And that's something that I, as a book coach, talk to clients about all the time. And the reason I know, one of the reasons I know what makes a book is because I have written so many books that weren't books. So my story is sort of the opposite of LAU, because I didn't know anybody when I'm a poet. I have an MFA in poetry. I studied with Allen Ginsberg at Brooklyn College, a million years ago. And actually, I lived in a Zen monastery. I moved out of the monastery, and this crazy thing happened with my job. I was a college professor, and I had 2 years left of my contract, but Polytechnic University, which was where I taught, they merged with NYU, and I lost my job. But because I had a contract, they had to pay me for 2 years. And I mean, nothing like that had ever happened to me in my life. And I said, and I continued to get health insurance and everything. And so I said, I'm going to write a book. And so I taught myself I knew I had to start, I figured out that you have to start writing articles. And so do you remember Media Bistro, either of you? Yeah. So I did all of those. I did all these videos. I learned how to, write an article, how to pitch an article, how to, go through that whole process. I started getting bylines. I wasn't sure what my book was going to be about. Then I figured out that I wanted to write about Christian conversion experiences. So I decided that I learned you have to write a proposal, and then, on and on and on and on. So I got that proposal written. I traveled around. I interviewed people, and I got an agent. It was, but it was all just by trial and error and just figuring it out. I did not know anybody. And I was really close to selling that proposal, and then the 2008 crash happened, and so everything shut down. So then I tried again with another proposal, and that didn't go anywhere. And then my daughter was born somewhere in here, and when she was about 3, she's 18 now. When she was around 3, I started to learn about the science of attachment. And I was going through my own stuff as a young mother, and I had a really strong reaction to the science of attachment. And I thought, this is really scary. I don't want to know anything about this, but I can't stop looking at it. Like, what is this about? And there was this thing I kept coming across, because I was doing a lot of writing at this point, and I kept coming across this thing called the strange situation, which is it's a tool, it's a research tool that's used in labs. And I loved the words, the strange situation. I was like, what is this? And I just started, looking into it. And I had so many questions. I didn't understand it. It's a 20-minute procedure. It should be easy to watch. It should have been easy to understand, but I couldn't grasp it. And that's how I knew that there was something really important here, because there was something about this simple 20-minute procedure that happens in a lab between a mother and a baby, or a caregiver and a baby, that was so profound that I couldn't get it. And so that's when I decided, oh, this is gonna be my book. I'm gonna write a book about the strange situation. I knew nothing about it other than what I had kind of learned on my own. And so then I said, here we go again. And so I told the world that I was writing a book about attachment, and I got into all these trainings and labs and archives and just a lot of, I got involved in a lot of interesting research, and it took me 10 years by the time I finally sold the book, and sold the book to Random House, and then it came out, and so here we are. So now, since the book came out, I am working with other people, women specifically, I've been working in this space for a while, but since the book came out especially, I'm working with women on how to do what I call turn the story you can't stop telling into a book the world needs to read. So that's how I look at books. Like, what is that obsession? What's that thing you just can't let go of, that like you're a dog with a bone? Because that's what it really takes to write a book. You have to be deeply, deeply committed. So that's my story.
So let's go to the next question. Between writing for fiction and nonfiction in turn. Why don't you go?
Yeah, sure.
There's a difference. You don't do the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say that just for everybody to understand. When you're writing a nonfiction book, you have to write a proposal first, which is a big document that's like a business plan for your book. What are the comps, the comparables? What's the overview? What is the table of contents? A marketing plan. It's a hefty thing. It's like 50 to 100 pages. In fiction, and then you sell that. You have an agent who sells that, or you sell it to an independent publisher. In fiction, you write the whole thing. Totally different scenario.
Did anyone else want to weigh in? Or that's covered it?
Well, I think in terms of the nonfiction proposal, you also have to have a couple of chapters.
Yes, and a couple sample chapters.
And sometimes you back into it. Sometimes you write the whole book, and then you craft the proposal.
Yeah, I encourage people not to do that because it can take so much time.
I agree, but sometimes you can't get your feet under you.
It's true. That's
You
true.
don't really know what you're talking,
Yes,
not what
that's
you're
true.
talking about, but what point of view and what messages you want to give to your particular audience. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's kind of hidden until you've really done the heavy lifting.
And that
so
actually takes
true.
us to the next question, which is about the people who can help you in terms of doing a book. And there are so many different people who can be involved. And maybe the three of you can explain the different roles and why you would choose one versus another: a literary agent, a writing coach, ghostwriter, editor, publisher, a book publishing strategist. I mean, it's a lot, and you're not going to have all of them, I presume.
I can talk to like traditional Big Five publishing, and all of those different people have a role in that. But to me, like if you want to get a book and your goal is to get it published, then the first thing you have to do is find a literary agent. But in order to find a literary agent, you need to have enough of a sense of what you're going to write and some sort of platform, something to say, some kind of overview, and then you send out a pitch letter and you try to talk to an agent. You have to have something for them to read. Finding an agent can be the hardest part of the whole process.
And this is for nonfiction.
This
Correct.
is for anything.
Yeah.
So book publishers, I think that some of the independents, some of the smaller publishers, I think maybe at academic publishers, it's different where you don't need a literary agent.
Yeah, that's true.
But for more traditional publishers, as an editor, I see so many proposals every week from agents. And these are relationships I've had for 30 years with these agents. They know what I like, they know what I'm good at, they know what I've published. We can't even begin to look at something that comes just via email. Like it has to, there's like a protocol to how it's done and it comes through an agent. Otherwise, it's just, you're kind of spinning your wheels.
So what's the process with a ghostwriter, Lauren? Lauren doesn't know.
Well, in terms of getting a publisher or in terms of
writing
making the book? In terms of writing the book, typically, there are many, many different genres of nonfiction books and fiction books. One of the interesting things that has happened to me, and I kind of got piled on the other day when we were talking about this, because over the past 2+ years, I've had people come to me and say, I want to write a novel. I have a cast of characters, I sort of have a plot idea, but I don't really have the chops to write the book. So can you help me write this novel? We can have a long discussion about the virtue of that or whatever. I personally absolutely adore writing novels, and if somebody comes to me and they actually have a beginning, a middle, and an end of sorts, I'm thrilled. In general, I would say that ghostwriters are individuals who are behind the scenes, although more and more ghostwriters are becoming collaborators. And very often, my author clients feel that having my name on the cover helps them, to get a book sold. We just came out last week with a book called We're Live in 5, My Extraordinary Life in Live Television by Jeff Margolis, who's a 9-time Oscar winner, and he's done everything, including Dolly Parton. He wanted my name on the cover, which I was so thrilled about. So it's Jeff Margolis with Loren Stephens. Another book that we came out with last week is for a Holocaust survivor. It's called Adieu, a memoir of Holocaust survival, which is just, gut-wrenching. And in that case, he preferred having just his name on the cover, but I'm acknowledged in the acknowledgement section. I couldn't have written this book without the help of Loren Stephens and her son, Josh. I co-opted my son into the family business. So, and the idea of going to a ghostwriter, again, is having a story that you're passionate to tell. You either don't have the discipline or the time or what I call the chops to really take it from the beginning to the middle to the end, and you happily engage someone to help you walk the walk and talk the talk and get to that book that you really have been thinking about for years and years and years. Sometimes we function as a book coach, which means, we just keep people accountable. We help them in some way to edit their book very often. We're their partner in crime, as it will. Right now I'm writing a book about Nazi saboteurs, which is just an absolutely fascinating book. I knew nothing about it. And that's one of the joys of writing for other people, is that I'm drawn into worlds that I maybe know absolutely nothing about, but I go down the rabbit hole. I do the necessary research. I make sure everything's validated. We get beta readers, look at the book. We get, experts in particular fields who make sure that you're not making a terrible mistake in terms of the facts that you're using. So we're one resource, and there really are so many.
Right. Bethany, I was hoping that you could tell us about being a writing coach and a book publishing strategist, because I understood correctly, that's part of book writing.
Yes, exactly. So I have done ghostwriter-ish things, but I talk about it more in terms of partnership. So because I'm a writer myself, I have chosen not to have my name on other people's books and have chosen money instead. That's how I
That's good.
Money's good. Yeah. So not that you don't get paid, of course, but it's a trade-off. Like I'd rather have more money, less credit.
Or it's balanced.
Yeah, exactly. But I have now decided I'm not doing that anymore. No more ghostwriting for me, because I really want to spend the rest of my life writing my own work. So that's the ghostwriting piece. But what I'd love to do is strategy. And I love what I call book coaching. It's not writing coaching so much. I always tell clients, I'm not your editor, I'm not gonna look at stuff between sessions, but I cannot help myself because I'm a teacher. I was a college professor for a long time, and I really enjoy the editorial experience. So the way I work with people is in cohorts or one-on-one, and I help them through the book proposal process. And so that will include some editing because people need help with their writing. I like to do it a little bit more from afar, and I really like to train cohorts to do it for each other. That's my favorite thing. So it's more strategy, less writing coaching. I tend to work with writers who are pretty strong as writers and just need help understanding how to tell a good story, how to find a sticky idea, how to bring it all together.
Okay, so if publishing is your goal, you've mentioned, I think it was the traditional, the big five. Let's talk about how you figure out what format or where you want to go. And I think it's the big five, self-published, and hybrid. If I'm missing anything, tell me. How do you figure out which way you're going to go or which way they're going to want you?
Yeah, well, I'll speak to that because that's so much a part of what I do and what we do in my cohorts. So the first thing that you want to think about is what is your goal? Because you're right, there's traditional publishing, which is the big five, the big conglomerates basically, and then there are indie publishers. And with the big five, you do need an agent. You tend to get a bigger advance. And then with the independents, you don't necessarily need an agent, although an agent can certainly help. And your advances tend to be smaller. Then there's hybrid publishing, which is kind of a partnership, where you're partnering with the author has to pay to play, but they can get the money back in royalties. That's the model. And then there's self-publishing, where you're paying everything up front and you don't get it back.
You have to do everything.
You have to do everything. In the hybrid model is really, the thing that makes the hybrid model different from self-publishing, as I understand it, is that they have distribution. So if you go with a good hybrid publisher, they can actually get your book distributed, and you can see your book on Amazon, you can see your book at Barnes & Noble, you can see your book in other venues, as opposed to self-publishing, that's really not going to happen. So it's really about your goal. Are you trying to build authority? If so, you probably want to stick to a traditional publisher. If you just want the book because you've always had a dream of writing a book and you want to give it to your friends and family, then hybrid or self-publishing is great. Hybrid is also really good if you are a professional and you already have a platform and you just need a little bump, or you want to really understand your thinking. You want to really get to what is my framework? What is my signature offer? This kind of thing.
Okay, so you get your book published. Author's not done. There's a whole other job that comes around about marketing and selling the book. And things come up, like you mentioned a platform. Do you need to have your platform first, or are you creating it? How do you get influencers to not just take your book, but to put it on their Instagram, do a reel, holding their book, praising you? How do you do that process? Why don't we start with you, Lauren?
I can tell you how we do it at a big publisher. If you don't have a platform, you're not going to get a book deal, right, with the big five, because even people with 1 million Instagram followers, if their audience isn't engaged, if they're not out there.
Let me break this up. Yeah. So is there a number of influencers you have, and how do they measure engagement? Is it, how many times people comment or like, or something more than that?
It's a combination of things, because you're probably not going to, the conversion rate is very low. It's a lot lower than people think it is, and there's the whole rule with social media that you have to see something 7 times before you're even going to think about buying it. There's all of this market, and I'm not a marketing expert, but I do know that we start our marketing and publicity plan 6 months before publication. I send it out for blurbs. We do a big Excel sheet of who the author knows, who are their media contacts, who are their personal contacts that have influence, and then we divide it up. Like, is it better if you know, I don't know, Hillary Clinton, and she's gonna, do something like at the Y where she's going to interview you. Are you gonna reach out to her first, or are we gonna reach out first, or you reach out first, and then we follow up and like close the deal? So there's a lot of logistics. There's speaking, we want people with speaking engagements, people are gonna do bulk buys. I mean, it's, in the nonfiction, I do very platform-driven nonfiction. Now, on the other hand, I also do narrative nonfiction and memoir. I'm talking more about like the prescriptive stuff, but the memoirs are very, very hard to sell. Narrative nonfiction, it has to be a subject that people really want to know about. But even then, if it's going to be kind of literary narrative nonfiction or literary memoir, you need to be plugged into those worlds.
And you haven't even mentioned all the book tours and the book signings and...
Well, the thing is, book tours and book signings don't really do very much. We don't really do that anymore because, we do it if it's in someone's hometown, if we think that they can, like, if you're a person that can bring in 300 people, then we will do a ticketed event where the price of entry is that you have to buy the book in advance. Because too many authors are out there, and this all like post-pandemic or middle of it, you just realize it wasn't effective. And then you don't want to have an author who's in a town where they don't know anyone and 3 people show up. And that happens so frequently. So it's like, as an author, you have to be able to like bring people in, and it's a lot harder than you think it is. And all the people who say, I can't wait to read your book, and I'll post about your book, and I'll come to your events, they never do. They rarely do. They rarely do.
Loren Stephens, how do you market books?
So, the notion of you finish your book and you type the end, that's the beginning.
Yeah.
That's the beginning of the next step, is the marketing. And for anyone who thinks that if they get a publishing deal, whether it's with Hachette or another one of the major publishing companies or an indie press, and there are some absolutely wonderful indie presses that have sort of niches that they look for certain types of books that they're going to shepherd and love and take care of. You are still the point person, and you need to partially take your marching orders from your publisher, and partially you have to sit down and think really hard about your audience and who are you writing this book for, and how many organizations can you network with that will help you leverage that book. One thing that I want to recommend is there's something called Atmosphere, and they put out a book promotional guide. So everything that we're telling you here, you can also take a look at their document online to help kind of walk you through this. Another aspect of marketing that I think is very interesting and important is your back of the cover endorsements. Who is going to say you've written the most incredible book in the world on Japan or whatever else it might be? And in my case, I'm a very close friend of Lisa C. Some of you may have read her many, many books. She was lovely and gave me an endorsement, and so did a few other people who loved my book and loved the genre that I was writing in, which was a novel about Japan. So you want to kind of think about who you know in the business, who can help you. And really, you're part of a community of writers who you will find can be the most generous people that you really want to reach out to, and they will help you.
Because they all know how hard it is,
Because
they've
they
been through it themselves.
They've known, and they've been burned, and they've sold 2 copies, and they've gone to book signings where 3 people showed up. And to Lauren's point, in terms of the book launch and how that all comes about, and where you go to a bookstore to kind of get yourself, out there at first. The best place is your local bookstore, where you have been a loyal patron, where you practically own stock in that company. They will open their arms to you, and you say to them, Diesel Books, which is my go-to bookstore in Los Angeles, I can bring 100 people to, our book launch, and they'll be thrilled. But if you can't deliver, they're not really that interested. And the same applies to all the local newspapers and the various literary journals, et cetera, you want to try and develop those relationships because that's your leverage. Somebody likes you, somebody wants to do you a favor. That's how it all comes about. And I don't think it's that different, really, than in any business. So much of it.
It's building knowing who your audience is, then, connecting with that audience, building a relationship with your
I'm
audience.
going to interrupt. I want to give Bethany an opportunity. We have more questions, but I'd like you to wrap this up, and then I'd like to open this to questions from everyone who wants to, get more information. And then I will close this up. There are books you can purchase. The authors are here to sign them. There's more wine. I invite you to go upstairs and see. We have a woman artist that's done some beautiful work. But let's close this up, please.
Sure. So speaking of marketing, I did not bring my book with me, so that was a fail on me. I should have brought my book so that you could buy it and I could sign it. But I did bring little pamphlets back there, flyers, so you can QR code it and buy it on Amazon if you so choose. So when my book came out in 2020, April of 2020, well, good timing. So this was after 10 years of working on this thing. Third proposal, finally got the deal of a lifetime from Random House, and the pandemic came. I mean, I will never forget just sitting in my chair realizing that this was coming for my book launch. Like, it was over. It was over. My lovely in-laws had planned this beautiful party. It was going to be epic. My whole family, my whole world was flying in. It was going to be this huge, huge, amazing deal, and that did not happen. However, what I learned was how to market myself. So again, I'm a self-taught human being. So I actually am one of those people who got a book deal, a major book deal from a major house with 0 social media. So that used to happen. I think it still happens occasionally. But so I decided it was time for me to get on Instagram. So I got on Instagram, and I just started posting and selling and making connections with people. And I still don't have a huge platform, but I've met a lot of amazing people, and I have sold a lot of books that way, and I have met beautiful clients and wonderful friends and made a whole world for myself and learned how to do it. So again, it's not huge, and it's certainly not, like some kind of a crazy platform, and I'm not an influencer, but it's really important to learn how to speak to your muse, what I call your muse, like the one person whose life is going to change after they read your book. And stay focused, be of service, don't get distracted by big numbers and big vibes, and just try to stay really connected to what matters to you, and then you can't lose.
I know you're going to, one thing I do want to say before questions, because I know we're talking about the business a lot, but, I'm happy, we're all happy to answer questions about writing.
Yes.
I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like we're talking all about the business pieces of this, but the writing is the good part, the fun part, the hard part, in a way, but that's where, if we all didn't love books and love writing, we wouldn't be up here, doing this to begin with, so.
Great.
I think that, from my perspective, that's what makes these books really important, it's the telling a story from a woman's perspective. And I think as women, we need to read more about other women's perspective. What was their journey? What can I take from it? How can I face whatever challenges knowing that someone else tried this? So it's a conversation. Reading a book is a conversation. So with that, we're opening this up for questions. What we would like, though, is for you to come up, because we're taping this, and to speak into the microphone, whatever your question is, and then we'll close it up after that. So who has a question? First questions, I see heads going like this. Don't be afraid, we won't bite. Who's contemplating? Come on up. Yes, yes. Please introduce yourself.
I am also a Lauren. I'm Lauren Tettenbaum. I am a social worker, a mom, a former lawyer, and a writer. So with all of those hyphens, I barely have any time. And I'm wondering how it is that you recommend that people carve out time. Is it, a certain chunk of time a day? 10 years is a little intimidating, especially when there are bills to pay and kids to feed, etc.
Well, my 10 years was in the midst of working. And so it's not that I took time off. I'm insane and I get up really early. And I tell women that I work with, if you're serious about this, you have to get up before your kids. And, I lived in a monastery for a long time, so I'm good at being really tired and then taking like a 10-minute nap, and it really makes a big difference. You don't have to make up the 2 hours of sleep with 2 hours of nap. It's real. So that's a big, important thing. And if you're serious, that's what has to happen. You just have to get up really, really early. And I'll tell you, like in private one time.
Bethany, I'm seeing your picture now, like the way they have the Einstein picture where it's E equals MC squared. Yours will be 2 hours sleep does not equal 2 hours of nap. It's a good
It's
one.
true. It's words to live by
Who's next?
and write by.
Come on up. Time. Not more.
Hi girls, I'm really enjoying tonight. It's great, it's smart women, it's fantastic. My name is Debbie Nigro. I'm not shy, I do talk radio for a living. I found out Lauren I was going to be here after featuring her on my show. But interestingly, I'm struggling. I just wrote a book, but not the book I wanted to write. I wrote a little book, it's called, very funny, How to Talk to Strangers, Advice from a Professional Stranger Talker, which just came out on Amazon. But I self-published it, because I knew a book coach, and I'm like, I just gotta get this done. So I did it, and there it is, and maybe someday you'll help me figure out what to do with it, since it just came out, and it's kind of fun. But the real book I wanted to write, I've been writing for 10 years. It was about being a female entrepreneur too early. My father died young. I come from a family of construction. He died, I didn't get the rest of the memo. I thought girls could do anything. In that story, it's a great story about how I got to 500 radio stations, but then I went bankrupt and penniless, and there's a whole trajectory. The reason I haven't written, I have papers everywhere in my house, is that I just couldn't get the nerve to write the real names of the real stories that hurt me so badly, that got in my way, that people have wronged that I trusted, that I shouldn't have trusted as a woman. You think men know better in some circumstances. How good would a book be without mentioning real names? And how do you go about telling a story that I think I'm inspired to do tonight, because it will help other young women coming up through business, what not to do and what to do. And I'm all about taking the shot. I can talk great. My whole thing is risk it or regret it. We're going to be dead. So, do I tell the story?
You can give them nicknames.
Oh, okay.
Like,
There you go.
I don't know.
Yeah.
The fat man, the X, the cool guy, the looker, the hustler. You just kind of give them funny nicknames.
This is a genuine question, because I was just about to take my 4 or 5 boxes of box number 1, 2, 3, 4 and put them in storage after 10 years. But then it's going, it's dead. But I might not just do it because of you girls tonight. Thank you.
Who's next? Yes, please.
Come on down.
Hello, my name is Julia St. Clair. I have been writing, ever since I can learn how to read. My grandmother, who was Sicilian, taught me how to read and write. I work in communications. I'm also a freelance writer and editor. And I finished writing my debut novel, which it's kind of on the cusp of fiction and nonfiction, so creative nonfiction, coming of age and healing journey. I am literally kind of like a fish going into water. Ironically, I got my bachelor's in communications and my master's in publishing, and I thought when I got my master's in publishing, all right, this is great, I'll be able to write a book and get published, and that's not what happened. Also, funny enough, I graduated during the pandemic, so in 2020. And I forget at times I've had a master's degree for 4 years since it all happened. But I'm wondering, as a first-time author who doesn't know anybody, what advice you would have with finding an agent, with finding either an agent to represent me or anyone else in my shoes for a big 5 publisher or for a small print or indie press.
Well, I think you might as well start at the top. You might as well give yourself that chance and put together a list of literary agents that represent authors that have books similar to yours, and then craft the most incredible sales pitch you've ever done in your life. I mean, it could take you 6 months, but at the end of that time, you will have articulated who your audience is, a couple of sentences about what the hook is for the book, who you are, why you wrote the book. And give yourself a certain amount of time and develop very thick skin, because you're going to get more no's than you are yeses. If you've gotten to a certain point where you just don't have the engine to keep going any longer with that, at least you've given it a shot. So the next level would be the independent presses, and there are some absolutely fantastic ones. And again, it's doing your homework, looking at those presses where your book would talk to that other books in their library, and why you think that your book fits their particular perspective. And again, one of the wonderful resources that everybody should have on their bookshelf is subscribe to Poets and Writers. If you do nothing else, this is one of your great handbooks, and the other one is Writer's Digest. This will make you feel like a writer. This will make you feel serious, right? This thing comes in the mail every 2 months, and it's like the call, it's the clarion call. So you will then go to the independent presses. Then if that doesn't work, and it may not, then the next step is to go to the hybrids, which it's kind of a collaboration between the money you put up and the money they put up, and how the advances get split, and it's complicated. You need an attorney to look at their
Some are better than others.
Yeah,
Some are legit and some are not
really
legit.
show games, and some are serious. So you need to be extremely careful about it, but don't discount it. And then last but not least, is the self-publishing venue. And there are self-publishers that get listed on Amazon. You can buy their book away, and believe it or not, and you can help me with this, there are many self-published authors who then get picked up by big houses because the numbers are just so unbelievable. It seems to be more of a Southern phenomenon in a way.
And it's also a genre fiction.
Yes.
It kind of
Yes.
depends, certain
Yes.
genres do better.
Yes.
Like right now, romantasy is
Yes.
the big thing. So
Yes.
people can earn a living self-publishing, and they do series of books.
Exactly.
But for something like, I would find books that are similar. And look in the acknowledgments.
Yes.
They'll thank their literary agent,
Yeah.
make a list of all the agents.
Great idea.
Yeah. That have books that represent authors.
Make a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet.
It's a business.
Keep
It's not
yourself
entrepreneur.
accountable. to yourself. Hire a book coach, perhaps, who can help keep you accountable and help you think outside the box. There's no formula per se. We're just giving you points along the road that you're going to have to follow. And you may meet someone, who's going to help you. You just don't even know. Keep going. That's another thing. Go to writers' conferences. Meet agents there. Talk to them about the book that you're thinking of writing or that you have written. Be out there. Be proactive. Yeah.
Even writers' retreats.
Exactly.
I mean, I've met amazing people on
Right.
writers'
And
retreats.
and they're so much fun.
And they're so much fun, and they're like-minded people, and you
Yeah.
all share each other, you share your work, and I mean, it's very nerve-wracking if, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I'm gonna read this out loud to everyone, but they're a supportive group, and then you can have a writing group, you can create a writing group where people come in and you all spend time
Right,
looking at
exactly.
each other's work and building a community. I mean, because writers do, they need, because we work alone, we need community. And so having a writer's community kind of helps you get the feedback, but you also get out of the house and get some nourishment.
Right, and you just never know who's going to say, gee, I know somebody who might be really interested in your book. And then, miracles happen.
Thank you so much.
So we'd like to say thank you to the Bronxville Women's Club, and we also have the local bookstore that Ellen will talk about in closing. Warmreth, she'll talk about that. Thank you for coming. And we have keys to the castle in the back. Pat Dunn, who I met through the Sarah Lawrence Writers Institute, which is another resource. She's a co-promoter of that organization that does travel for writing. I also would like to mention The Shit No One Tells You About Writing.
I was going to mention that as well.
That is an amazing podcast
podcast,
which
yeah.
answers all these questions, and they also have beta reader matchup and
Yeah,
writing
it's great.
groups, aside from all the other resources that our guests have mentioned. And thank you for being
Well, I'd
here.
like to thank you all
Yeah,
for this.
Look forward, anyone wants to re-listen, we will put it out on our podcast. It will probably be episode 72. And where I want to thank LMC Media out of Larchmont and Merrimack for filming it for us. We really appreciate that. Thank you, Mike.
They made it really easy. I was going to thank everybody, first of all, for coming, for panelists who come from Brooklyn, California, and Catskills, Phoenicia. Wanwarath, thank you very much for doing this. The Balance Dilemma has provided the foods and refreshments. Wine is the club, and I wanted to leave you with a thought. Rabbi Hillel, 2,000 years ago, asked 3 questions. The first question is, if I'm not for myself, who will be? And while it seems like it's an invitation for you to find your voice and speak up, and it is, it's also a reminder of all of the people who can support you, who want to support you. And so you're not alone in this. Second question was, if I'm only for myself, what am I? And that is really at the crux of this ability to be part of a community. You want to be a human being, and you want to help everyone in your community. And to your point about writing circles or retreats, that begins to be your community. So focus on that. And the last question, the one that is, to me, the most profound is, if not now, when? We all can say we want to do this, but if you don't do it now, I can tell you for sure that what you'll have is a regret. So I ask you to go and start today by networking, by talking to people, by making connections, by starting the process, getting the help that you need, joining writing circles. We could start one here at the Bronxville Women's Club. We did that in the past. There's no reason not to do it now. You see this beautiful building. It's available. So, on that note, I want to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart for helping me achieve a dream of being a teacher.